What if the key to the greatest mystery in our history has been hiding in plain sight all along, concealed within the frames of ancient paintings? A close study of old engravings and canvases from the 15th century and earlier reveals a startling and unsettling detail that is somehow always overlooked. In these scenes from the past, which capture daily life, architecture, and nature with incredible precision, the most important object in the sky is missing. There is no sun. Landscapes of the Moscow Kremlin from 1661, panoramas of Astrakhan from the late 17th century, even later views of the Neva River. In so many of these works, the sky looks strangely empty. Of course, one could find simple explanations. Perhaps the artists lacked the skill to depict the bright light, or maybe they preferred to paint on overcast days. But when this detail becomes a consistent pattern, it raises serious questions. Modern people, as soon as they get a camera, almost instinctively start capturing the world around them. And more often than not, their focus is on sunrises and sunsets. It's a natural desire to record the most prominent phenomenon in the sky. So why did the ancient masters, who documented their reality so faithfully, persistently ignore this object? Was it the result of some unspoken rule? An artistic convention? Or is the reason far more shocking? Perhaps, in those distant times, there was simply nothing for them to paint. This question becomes the starting point for an investigation that could change our entire understanding of the past. The absence of the sun in these paintings isn't just an artistic quirk. It creates a fundamental, practical problem that moves our investigation from art galleries to the workshops of ancient engineers. How did humanity measure time in a world without a sun? The first answer that comes to mind, the sundial, actually only deepens the mystery, turning it into a true technological anomaly. It's commonly believed that a sundial is a primitive device, no more complex than a stick in the ground. But this is a dangerous misconception. To create a working, accurate sundial, it's not enough to simply observe a shadow. Even an animal can see the connection between a shadow and a light source, but that doesn't make it a watchmaker. The creation of such an instrument requires a whole set of complex knowledge, each piece a pinnacle of intellectual evolution. First, one must grasp the very existence of time as a measurable, linear quantity. For modern people who live by schedules, this seems obvious, but imagine the consciousness of an ancient person. How would they arrive at the idea that a day can be divided into equal segments? This is a colossal philosophical and conceptual leap, from the simple cycle of light-dark to the abstract idea of hours and minutes. Second, it requires advanced mathematics and geometry. You need to not just see the shadow, but understand the laws of its movement. This demands a mastery of geometry, the ability to divide a circle into equal parts, calculate angles, and understand how the shadow's path changes not only throughout the day, but also with the seasons. And finally, the most crucial and undeniable element without which any sundial becomes a useless decoration is the knowledge of geographical latitude. A clock that works perfectly in one city will be wrong just a few hundred miles to the north or south. To calibrate it, you must know your precise position on the planet. And the very concept of latitude, judging by the geographical maps and scientific treatises that have survived, only appears and comes into active use in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. This is the exact moment when navigation and cartography take a quantum leap forward. And here, the clues begin to form a coherent picture. If we look at the actual, complex, and functional sundials preserved in museums, we find a startling coincidence. The earliest of them are not from deep antiquity. For example, one of the oldest exhibits in the Hermitage, a complex portable sundial designed to be worn around the neck, was made in 1554. Its design is astonishing. It's equipped with a compass for orientation and a plumb line for leveling. But most importantly, it has an adjustable gnomon that allows it to be used across a whole range of latitudes from 47 to 57 degrees. This is not a primitive tool. It is a high-tech device of its time. It was during this era, in the mid to late 16th century, that the art of making sundials suddenly flourished across Europe. The Italian astronomer Giovanni Padovani published a whole treatise in 1570 with instructions for making them. Another scholar, Giuseppe Biancani, did the same around 1620. Even in Russia, the trend of integrating sundials into architecture appeared much later, in the 18th century, when they were used to decorate mileposts on the roads out of St. Petersburg. A marble pyramid with such a clock, marking the first mile from the central post office, still stands at the intersection of the Fontanka River and Moskovsky Prospect. This creates a strange timeline. For thousands of years, humanity, credited with building the pyramids and the Colosseum, was apparently unable to master a technology based on the simple observation of a shadow. And then, within a single century, an explosion occurs. Complex, accurate, portable devices appear, scientific papers are written, and sundials become commonplace. This time lag seems inexplicable if we assume the sun has always been there. But it becomes perfectly logical if we propose that the engine for these clocks, the sun itself, only appeared in the sky shortly before. Perhaps the issue wasn't the slow pace of human ingenuity, but the fact that, until a certain point, there was simply nothing to measure. The technological vacuum we've discovered is just one thread in this tangled web. The evidence pointing to a radical change in our world is found not only in stone and metal, but also in the very foundation of human civilization: language. Every phenomenon, every object that humanity encounters inevitably gets a name. The airplane appeared, and so the word airplane was born. If there is a sea, the word sea exists. Words are the sonic imprints of reality. Their existence confirms the presence of a phenomenon, and their absence shouts louder than any witness. Armed with this principle, we can look into the past far more deeply than artifacts allow, and what we find there is chilling. Let's turn to the texts that offer the most honest reflection of our ancestors' daily lives. We're not talking about official chronicles or religious treatises, which could have been rewritten and edited many times, but about private correspondence, about notes scratched onto pieces of birch bark. The Dictionary of Birch Bark Manuscripts, covering the period from the 11th to the 14th century, is a unique window into the real world of that time. In these short messages, people discussed debts, made deals, settled family matters, complained, and celebrated. They wrote about what surrounded them, what was important in their lives. And in this vast collection of raw, unfiltered language, the word sun is not recorded. We should pause and absorb the full weight of this anomaly. Can you imagine the life of a peasant, a merchant, or a warrior in which there was no occasion to mention the sun? Planting and harvesting, the start and end of a journey, the very concept of a day, all are tied to it. It seems incredible that a person whose entire existence depended on light and warmth would never use this key word in their vocabulary, if the object actually existed in the sky. The silence of these ancient texts is deafening. It tells us that a fundamental element of our current reality was missing from the worldview of people at that time. And then, as if a dam of silence broke, a linguistic explosion occurs. If we open historical dictionaries covering a later period, such as the 1893 Materials for a Dictionary of the Old Russian Language, we see a completely different picture. Here, the word sun is not just present, it is alive and breathing, woven into the very fabric of the language. It's used in peace treaties as a symbol of eternity and the unbreakable nature of commitments. Derivative words appear, such as sun-like, meaning similar to the sun in its brilliance. It becomes a metaphor, part of complex philosophical and religious concepts. For example, one text mentions a sect of sun worshippers, not in the primitive sense of adoring a celestial body, but in the sense of performing some kind of transformation related to the sun. This abrupt transition from a complete absence of the word to its deep integration into language and culture cannot be a coincidence. Words don't appear out of nowhere. Their birth and development is a slow process, reflecting humanity's gradual understanding of the world. But here we see something different. The word seems to have been suddenly introduced into use along with the phenomenon it describes. This linguistic Big Bang perfectly aligns in time with the technological leap in sundial creation and the mysterious absence of the sun in paintings. All the evidence points to the same historical turning point. What event, so massive and all-encompassing, took place between the era of the silent birchbark scrolls and the time when the word sun began to shine from the pages of books? What force ignited it not only in the sky, but in the consciousness of all humankind? Now that we've gathered the evidence, it's time to assemble it into a single, chilling picture. We are faced with three independent but perfectly synchronized phenomena. First, the silence of art. Artists before the late 15th century behave as if the brightest object in the sky simply does not exist. Second, the technological paradox. For millennia, humanity fails to invent the sundial, and then in the 16th century makes an incredible leap forward in the field, as if suddenly given the necessary tool. And third, the linguistic explosion. The key word sun is absent from the living language of antiquity, and then rapidly enters the lexicon, acquiring a multitude of meanings and concepts. Each of these phenomena, taken separately, could be dismissed as coincidence or incomplete data. But together, they form an undeniable chain of evidence pointing to one specific event. One specific date that became the turning point in the history of our world. The central hypothesis that unites all these facts sounds so radical that it could shatter the foundations of our worldview. The sun we see today appeared in our sky only in the late 15th century. To be precise, it happened in 1492. At that very moment, the world changed forever. This date, known to us from school textbooks as the year of the discovery of America, actually marks an event of immeasurably greater scale. The birth of a new world in the most direct, physical sense. In light of this hypothesis, familiar historical terms suddenly take on a new, literal meaning. Think about what the phrase "end of the old world" really means. Historians explain it metaphorically. Old geographical concepts collapsed with the discovery of a new continent. But what if it's not a metaphor? What if it was a literal description of a physical process? The old world, a world without our sun, truly came to an end. In its place, a new world began, illuminated by the rays of a new star. And what about the Renaissance, or rebirth? We are told it was a revival of interest in ancient art and science. But doesn't that explanation seem too narrow for such a powerful term? What if it wasn't just culture that was being reborn, but life on the planet itself? What if, after a long period of twilight and cold, the Earth received warmth, light, and energy that triggered an explosion of growth in all spheres of human activity, from agriculture to art? The Renaissance was not just a cultural phenomenon. It was climatic and biological. The world itself was reborn. This concept explains many historical mysteries. It explains why the 16th century marks the beginning of a massive population boom, technological development, and the age of discovery. Humanity gained a new, almost inexhaustible source of energy that changed everything. More efficient farming became possible, leading to food surpluses. Living conditions improved, which spurred demographic growth. Long sea voyages became feasible, guided by celestial bodies that either didn't exist before or looked different. Our entire civilization in its modern form is a child of this new sun. Accepting this hypothesis isn't just about revising a historical date. It's a complete rejection of our familiar timeline, and an admission that the true, documented history of humanity is much shorter than we thought. History before 1492 is either a myth or a description of a completely different world, with different physical laws and a different sky overhead. But as soon as we accept this shocking truth, we are faced with a new, even deeper and more disturbing question. If our sun is new, if it was switched on just 5 centuries ago, then what was there before it? Did our ancestors live in eternal darkness and cold? Or perhaps, did a different star shine in the sky of the old world? And if so, what happened to it? This question leads us away from human history to the history of the planet and the heavens themselves, and the answer may be even more unbelievable than the appearance of the sun. The question raised by the appearance of a new sun doesn't just hang in the air. It leads our investigation into the darkest corners of cosmology and forces us to look at the night sky with entirely new eyes. If our ancestors didn't live in eternal darkness, then their world must have been lit by a different star. The truth is, we see its cooled shell almost every night. The ancient world was illuminated by what we now call the moon. It is the first sun, extinguished, burned out, and turned into a ghostly disk against the velvet of space. This idea overturns everything we know about celestial mechanics, but it flows logically from our previous discoveries and explains even more mysteries. Consider the very nature of moonlight. Modern science offers a simple and at first glance logical explanation. The moon has no light of its own. It merely reflects sunlight. But if you discard this dogma for just a moment and trust your own senses and observations, the absurdity of this claim becomes clear. Sunlight and moonlight are not just different in intensity. They are absolute opposites in their essence. Sunlight is golden, dry, and warm. It carries energy, makes plants grow, and heats the earth. Moonlight is silvery, often associated with moisture and coolness. It is cold. If the moon's light were merely a reflection of the sun's, their characteristics would be similar. A reflection in a mirror doesn't change the nature of the object being reflected. So why does reflected sunlight suddenly become its polar opposite? There is more practical proof. A simple physics experiment anyone can do. If you focus sunlight with a magnifying glass, you can easily generate enough heat to set paper on fire. This is concentrated energy. Now, try the same experiment with moonlight, even during the brightest full moon, and you won't achieve the slightest increase in temperature. A moonbeam carries no thermal energy. This simple fact completely refutes the reflection theory and proves that we are dealing with a radiation of an entirely different nature. People who live in rural areas, far from city light pollution, know how powerful the moon's glow can be. During a full moon, it's so bright you can easily navigate, and objects cast sharp, clear shadows. This is a residual glow, an echo of former greatness, not a pale reflection of a distant star. Thus, a new picture emerges. Originally, there were 2 suns in Earth's sky. One of them is what we now call the moon. At a certain point in 1492, The second one, our current sun, was switched on in our system. For a time, they likely existed together, creating unique climate conditions on the planet. This two suns period was the true golden age, echoes of which survive in myths of an eternal summer and a paradise on Earth. But nothing lasts forever. The first, older sun gradually faded as its energy depleted. This process culminated in a global cosmic catastrophe that left a deep scar on human history. That event was the year 1815, recorded in chronicles as the year without a summer. Official history links it to the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. But was the eruption the cause, or merely one of the consequences of a much larger process? It was in this year that the second, older sun finally went out. What we now see as the moon is the iron-nickel shell left behind after a star burns out. Its light vanished, and its heat was gone forever. The consequence was a sudden, catastrophic climate change across the entire planet. The world plunged into cold. It was only after 1815 that winter as we know it, with snow, frost, and ice, appeared in our world. Before that, the climate was much milder, as two suns were sufficient to heat the planet. The dimming of the moon-sun marked the birth of winter and the end of that brief era when humanity lived under two suns. This chain of discovery, which began with a simple observation about old paintings, has led us to conclusions that go far beyond revising history or cosmology. The appearance and disappearance of celestial bodies on some kind of schedule, sudden technological and linguistic leaps, radical climate changes. None of this fits well with a theory of natural random processes. The picture that emerges looks less like random evolution and more like a carefully planned and externally controlled process. The stakes are now raised to the absolute maximum as we approach the most important question of all. Who are we, and what is our place in this world? If the history we know is a lie, and the very sky above our heads is unstable, perhaps our own origin is not what it seems. Perhaps we are participants in a grand experiment. Imagine our world, not as an independent planet spinning in an infinite cosmos, but as a closed system, a sort of giant terrarium or aquarium. At some point, a creator, whose motives and goals are unknown to us, decided to launch this project. He didn't wait millions of years for life to arise on its own. Instead, he formed the ecosystem in a single moment. He placed people in it, all of different ages, from infants to the elderly, endowing them with ready-made memories of a past that never happened. To create the illusion of deep time and antiquity, he arranged ready-made props throughout the aquarium, the ruins of ancient civilizations that we now excavate and study. We look at these stones and think of millennia, but in reality, they could have been bought at a store and placed on the floor of our world the day before we appeared. And then, when everything was ready, he turned on the light, that new sun of 1492. In this model, the creator is not the all-good God from religious texts, but rather an experimenter, a scientist, or even just a hobbyist who raises humans the way we raise fish in an aquarium. He is interested in observing our behavior, how we build societies, fight wars, love, and create technology. The fish in the aquarium don't know where they came from either. They all meet at the moment of settlement, and for them, that is the beginning of time. The ruins of a sunken castle at the bottom are, to them, evidence of ancient eras, not a plastic decoration. And most importantly, they have no idea that beyond the glass walls of their small world, entire oceans exist. For them, their aquarium is the entire universe. Don't you find this analogy terrifyingly accurate? If we accept this concept, then all of official history, as taught in schools and universities, appears in a completely different light. It is not the result of the painstaking work of scholars reconstructing the past piece by piece, but a deliberately created forgery, a massive information operation. This false history was written by novelists and ideologues in the 19th and 20th centuries with a single purpose: to shape a false reality for the test subjects and cut them off from the knowledge of their true origins and recent past. This is done so that the slaves in the terrarium do not think about their lost freedom of yesterday and about who is pulling the strings. Official history is based on carefully selected and often fabricated sources, like medieval knightly romances. They praise pathetic knights who seek rich brides to improve their station, a perfect allegory for entire nations seeking foreign patronage. We are made to believe chronicles written by court scribes on command, to please their rulers or criminal syndicates. We are convinced of evolutionary theory, of the random origin of man, while more and more facts suggest we are the product of artificial creation. Modern humanity has already reached a level of development where it can begin to ask uncomfortable questions and reconsider the dogmas imposed on it. Along with rethinking the concepts of the cosmos and the shape of the Earth, a reassessment of our place in this system must inevitably follow. We are not the pinnacle of nature. We are either someone's experiment or simply a labor force in a giant aquarium, and our main task is to realize it. Realizing that official history is just a backdrop in a giant terrarium is the first crucial step to waking up. But it's not enough to tear down the old worldview. We must replace it with a new one, based not on the fictions of court scribes, but on real, though carefully hidden, facts and events. When we cast aside the false chronology, a true, much shorter, and more dramatic history of our world is revealed. This history is not a smooth evolutionary process, but a series of abrupt leaps, catastrophes, and controlled events, each of which fundamentally changed the rules of the game. Let's reconstruct this true timeline based on the milestones we have already deciphered. The beginning of our era should be sought not in antiquity, but in the much more recent past. Before the 9th century AD, a completely different pre-flood civilization existed, which we can tentatively call the civilization of the Rus. It was a world we know almost nothing about, a world before the global reset. Between the 10th and 15th centuries, the first catastrophe occurred, the Great Flood. Water covered most of the land, destroying the previous civilization and erasing almost all traces of its existence. It was only towards the end of the 15th century that the water began to recede, revealing a new, altered landscape. It was at this juncture, against the backdrop of the receding water, that the key event that started our investigation took place. In 1492, our current sun appears in the sky. This is not just an astronomical phenomenon. It is an act of creation, the launch of a new cycle, the beginning of the new world in the most literal sense. However, the appearance of the star did not yet mean the appearance of modern humanity. The planet was empty. The first humans, created for this new world, appeared only in the mid-16th century. These were small test groups. The truly massive settlement of Earth by people, our direct ancestors, happened only in 1757, just 2.5 centuries ago. All ancient history before this moment is implanted memories and fake artifacts. The next milestone on this timeline is the catastrophe we've already discussed. In 1815, the second old sun, the moon, goes out. The year without a summer arrives, and for the first time, winter appears on the planet. The climate changes dramatically, and living conditions become harsher. But the most terrifying and important event for us happens just a few decades later. In 1857, what can only be called the Clone Revolution begins. This term needs clarification. We are not talking about clones in the primitive biological sense, grown in a test tube. It is more a designation for another type of being, externally indistinguishable from humans, but fundamentally different in their essence. This was the next stage of the creator's experiment, or perhaps the intervention of a third party. In 1857, these clones were introduced into human society, and from that moment, a hidden war for control of the planet began. This war was long and bloody, and it ended in humanity's defeat. The key date everyone must know is 1957. It was in this year that the clones achieved final victory and seized complete control of the Earth. Human civilization in its original form ceased to exist. From that moment on, we have been living in a world that is not run by humans and not for the benefit of humans. This shocking conclusion is not just a theory about the past, it is the bridge that directly connects the events of a century and a half ago with today. Because the war that began in 1857 and entered a phase of full occupation in 1957 is not over. It is continuing right now. It is fought not on battlefields with tanks and planes, but in our cities, our homes, and our minds. It is a silent war for the complete extermination of the remnants of true humanity. And most of us don't even suspect we are a part of it. This hidden war, which began over a century and a half ago, brings the global conspiracy down to a deeply personal, everyday level. It means the enemy is not somewhere far away, across the ocean, or in secret government bunkers. The enemy is among us. He walks the same streets, works in the next office, and perhaps even lives with you under the same roof. According to available data, there are no more than 1 million true humans left on Earth today. Everyone else, which is 99% of the planet's population, are clones. They look like us, they talk like us, but their inner essence is completely different. Their goals and objectives are fundamentally at odds with those of humanity. In this new world, true humans are an endangered species, placed on the red list of the victorious civilization. A constant methodical hunt is underway, with the goal of their complete and final extermination. This hunt is not carried out with weapons, but with more subtle and effective tools: economic, social, informational, and technological. There are special devices and methods that can flawlessly distinguish humans from clones, and the relevant occupation services certainly possess such tools. The entire system built on the planet after 1957 is designed to identify and neutralize pockets of human resistance. The last significant enclaves of true humans have survived on the territory of Rus. It is this fact, not any economic or political reasons, that is the true root of the global pressure that modern-day Russia is experiencing. The rest of the world, under the full control of the new civilization, is systematically and purposefully engaged in suffocating Russia. Their ultimate goal is not the seizure of resources or territories in the conventional sense. Their goal is to finish off the last remnants of humanity and establish their complete and undisputed control over the entire terrarium. This theory offers a completely different lens through which to view modern geopolitics. What is presented to us as a clash of ideologies, a struggle for markets, or historical grievances is, in fact, just a smokescreen hiding the true nature of the conflict. This is not a war of nations or states. It is an interspecies war, the final battle for the survival of the human race. That is why it is being waged with such ferocity and with all available means. Moreover, this knowledge forces us to look not only at the news, but at the people around us in a completely new way. If 99% of the population are not human, then who are they? How do they think? What do they want? It makes you think about the nature of crowds, of mass culture, of the meaningless trends and irrational behavior we witness every day. Perhaps it's not just human foolishness, but the manifestation of a completely different, non-human logic. This thought is unsettling. It pulls the rug out from under your feet, but it also provides the key to understanding what is happening. We are living in occupied territory, in a world where humans have become a persecuted minority. And realizing this fact is the first step toward starting to resist. For this entire grand system of deception to work, with its manageable sky, fake history, and a hidden war of species, the very physical foundation of our world must be different. The official scientific model of a spherical Earth flying through an infinite universe simply leaves no room for such total control. The final and most crucial piece of the puzzle is realizing that the actual physics of our terrarium differs from what is described in textbooks. Our planet is not a sphere or a ball. It is a different, more localized structure, which is what allows it to be managed like a closed ecosystem. In this new model, the Sun and Moon are not giant celestial bodies millions of miles away. They are relatively small, flat objects located close to Earth, within a range of about 6,000 kilometers. They are part of our local system, not distant cosmic wanderers. And the most irrefutable proof of this system's artificiality can be observed during a total solar eclipse. We are told that the Moon is 400 times smaller than the Sun, but also 400 times closer, and therefore their apparent sizes from Earth are a perfect match. The probability of such a coincidence in a random universe is practically zero. But it ceases to be a coincidence if we are dealing with two objects of similar actual size, positioned at different altitudes within the same system. The perfect alignment of the Moon and Sun is not a cosmic miracle. It is more like a manufacturer's mark, a direct sign that the system was engineered and created. This is precisely why the topic of the Sun's appearance and disappearance, which might seem utterly absurd, is in fact a complex and very real issue for those at the top of the control pyramid. It's no accident that in the fall of 2015, information was leaked into the public sphere that the Sun could go out. Then, in December of the same year, both the Pope and Queen Elizabeth II made almost simultaneous announcements about a coming end of the world, and their speeches referred not to a metaphorical apocalypse, but literally to an end of the light, or the sun. They both alluded to certain extraterrestrial forces that, in the Queen's opinion, humanity is powerless to combat. If one sun in our system has already gone out, what's to stop the same thing from happening to the second one? Too many facts and pieces of evidence have been surfacing lately to continue ignoring them. The journey we've taken began with a simple question about the absence of the sun in old paintings, and has led us to the realization that we live in an artificially created world, in a territory occupied by a hostile civilization. This information does not offer easy answers or simple solutions. It merely opens a door. To look through it and begin your own investigation of the world around you, questioning every imposed dogma, is a personal choice for each of us. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of your awakening.